got, 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 needs. Oh, hello, and welcome back. Glad to see you. I'm Ewan Marshall, and welcome to the second episode of Gazeta Brasil, your weekly Brazilian football show. This week, the audio problems that I had last week have not been resolved, so as you can see, we're still here in my São Paulo flat, but don't worry, because in no time I will be out terrorizing the local bakeries and cafes. And today we're going to talk about Flamengo, Brazil's most popular club, and we're also going to have a look back at the first week of the Brazilian Championship. But first, let me go and put a pot of coffee on and I'll roll the titles. Okay, so my coffee is safely in its mug, and I've got this extravagant creamy bun sort of thing from the local bakery. So let's get started on this week's show by having a look back at last week's Brazilian Championship action. First, we go to Belo Horizonte in what was arguably the headline game of match day 1, as Cruzeiro hosted South American champions Grêmio. Now, the game itself unfortunately didn't really live up to the billing. Cruzeiro were sluggish and apathetic, and Grêmio were really in control and dominant without having two of their best players in Luan and Jeromel. Now, new Grêmio signing André got the game's only goal and got the South American champions off to a great start in this league season. Now, that turned out to be the only away win of the weekend, with the momentum firmly being with the home sides. Reigning champions Corinthians won 2-1 at home against Fluminense, getting a good start to their title defence. And Flamengo drew 2-2 with Vitória in a really crazy little game, which involved a goal in only 16 seconds from Lucas Paquetá, and then Flamengo's Everton Ribeiro was red carded for handball? Not sure about that one. Elsewhere, the big winners were Atlético Paranaense, who crushed Chapecoense 5-1, and newly promoted América Mineiro got themselves off to an excellent start, beating Sport Recife 3-0 at home. Now on to our main story, because today we're talking about Flamengo, which is the biggest club in a country of 200 million people, but they've only won one league title in the last 25 years. So what's the deal with Flamengo? Now, we start with a question from one of our viewers, Matthew Pike on Instagram, who asks, a recent study confirmed that Flamengo remain the most supported club in Brazil and in almost every region. Why do they have such a strong following outside Rio de Janeiro? So, thanks Matt, that's an excellent question, and really it's even for a lot of Brazilian football fans, it would be difficult for them to properly answer. Now, the survey in question was posted last week by Brazil's biggest newspaper, Folha de São Paulo, and it showed that Flamengo remain the most popular club in the country with 18% of fans, with Corinthians in second with 14%, but as Matt mentioned, in the north and northeast regions of Brazil, which are thousands of miles away from Rio de Janeiro, where Flamengo are based, Flamengo is still the most popular club, and by some distance. For example, in the north, 37% of the locals are fans of Flamengo, which is streets ahead of any other club, including local clubs from the north. Now, to explain this, we need to go back to the 1930s and two crucial presidents, Getúlio Vargas, the president of Brazil, and José Bastos Padilha, the president of Flamengo. Football in Brazil had just become professional, and it was still extremely regional, and would actually continue to be so long after the first national championship was organised in 1971. Now, the first attempt to make football a Brazil-wide sport came with the advent of radio, but only radio stations in São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, which was Brazil's capital at the time, had the necessary infrastructure to broadcast games across the country. So as a result, in these far-flung corners of Brazil, the only games you could get on the radio were from the São Paulo or Rio de Janeiro state championships, which explains why teams like Flamengo, Corinthians, Vasco da Gama and Palmeiras are still very popular in these regions. But what this doesn't explain is just how much more popular Flamengo became than any of these other clubs. And it's not simple enough to say that Flamengo were the best team at the time, because they really weren't. They went for 12 years without a title in the 1930s, and this is exactly the period in which they become Brazil's most popular club. Enter José Bastos Padilha, who was the president of Flamengo between 1933 and 1938. Now, with football having just become professional, he recognised quite quickly the potential mass appeal of the sport, and he went about trying to attract these new fans of the sport, which in Rio de Janeiro were invariably poor, working class and black. Now, to endear the club to the people, Flamengo decided to sign 3 of the country's most prominent black players. You had Fausto, Leonidas da Silva and Domingos da Guia. And this strategy worked perfectly because almost overnight, a club which was associated with the aristocracy of Rio de Janeiro became one of the most popular teams of the city's working class. Now, at the same time, Brazil's nationalist president Getúlio Vargas was investing heavily in the idea of creating a Brazilian identity, and as such the state sought to use football as a bit of a propaganda tool to this end. Now, Flamengo, being based in the capital of Rio de Janeiro and having this appeal over social classes with white players and black players, they were the ideal fit for this national image that Vargas was looking to construct. Now, during his presidency, Vargas created a paternal relationship between the Brazilian state and the working class, and Flamengo was their team. The rest, as they say, is history. Now, if you'd like to learn more about this and you speak a little Portuguese, I highly recommend a PhD thesis from historian Renato Soares Coutinho entitled Flamengo Grande, Brasil Maior. I'll link to that in the description below. It's a great read, won't take you very long. So nowadays, this makes Flamengo a really fascinating club because despite the fact that they've never really been consistently the best team in Brazil, apart from their glory years in the middle of the 1970s and early 80s, because of this popularity, their fans believe that they should be winning everything every year. Now, Flamengo change managers more regularly than they change toothbrushes, and these inflated expectations from the fans make it one of the most difficult clubs to manage in Brazil. Now, in a particularly memorable episode in 2003, Flamengo coach Osvaldo de Oliveira was sacked after only a few months, only to be replaced by his brother Valdemar Lemos. And in what has become a classic Brazilian YouTube moment, as soon as Valdemar Lemos was announced, the fans revolted, immediately asking for his head after he'd only had the job for maybe 2 minutes.
O novo técnico do Flamengo é o senhor Valdemar. Irmão do... Por que o Valdemar? A gente tem que pensar no melhor do Flamengo. Achamos que a torcida é muito importante ao Flamengo, tá certo? São 10 jogos hoje. E o Valdemar é uma pessoa de confiança nossa no momento. Não, nós não conversamos.
I must have watched that video about 200 times. And this revolving door of coaches doesn't seem to have let up, because in the reign of the current president, Eduardo Bandeira de Melo, Flamengo have already sacked 12 coaches, including just a couple of weeks ago Paulo César Carpegiani, who was sacked at the end of the state championship right before the start of the National League. And Carpegiani wasn't the only one to be sacked. Flamengo also binned their director of football, Rodrigo Caetano. They got rid of their legendary ex-player Moser, who was doing an administrative role at the time, and they got rid of fitness coach Jaime de Almeida, and also physio Marcelo Martorelli, who had been at the club for 28 years. And I repeat, all of this within 2 weeks before the start of the Brazilian Championship. So all of this makes Flamengo a really interesting team to watch because they have a very exciting squad. We talked last week about Vinicius Júnior and Lucas Paquetá, and they also have excellent established Brazilian players in Diego, central defender Juan, and also goalkeeper Diego Alves. But even with all of this, they're only ever a tiny wobble away from absolute crisis. Now, a draw at home on Wednesday night against Independiente Santa Fe in the Copa Libertadores has left Flamengo fans seething, and anything less than a win this weekend against América Mineiro could see things explode once again. So that's all for this week's Gazeta Brasil. I hope you enjoyed it. Just to let you know that there won't be any show next week because I'll be busy covering a Paralympic swimming tournament here in São Paulo, but never fear, the normal service will resume after that. Now, please make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you can like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and also don't forget to follow us on Instagram, because I've been posting lots of live match day broadcast content, all that sort of stuff, and people seem to like it. So please follow us there. And I'll post all the links to these social media sites below. And also, if you have any questions, any suggestions, any topics you want to see covered, get in touch with us through any of the social media I've just mentioned, or you can always just drop a comment below this particular video. So once again, thanks for joining us. I'm Ewan Marshall. I'll see you next time. Ciao, ciao.